Welcome to the Travel Gluten-Free podcast, where you can listen in on how to lead a gluten-free lifestyle with more fun and ease. Travel gluten-free is like having a best friend by your side to give you the most up-to-date gluten-free traveler information. Let Travel Gluten-Free be your #1 source for tips, tricks, and advice you can use to safely navigate your next gluten-free travel adventure. Enjoy food, enjoy travel, and enjoy life. And now, here's your show host, Illiquity.
Hey, my gluten-free friends, this is Illiquity, and I'm really excited to be here today with a guest for the Travel Gluten-Free podcast. So today is season 9, episode 11, and I have a really awesome guest today that I'm really excited to bring here to the podcast. But before we get into the show, I'd like to ask you to come over to my new website at www.travelglutenfreepodcast.com. And I just newly revamped it. I'm super excited about it. And make sure to download your free ebook, The 10 Tips for Traveling Gluten-Free. If you scroll all the way down to the bottom of the page, you'll see it at the bottom next to the picture of the beautiful boat on the tropical island. So just click the little bar next to it, and you can sign up and get that instant download, your 10 tips to traveling gluten-free. So my guest today, she is a career break and sabbatical expert and the author of the upcoming book, Taking a Career Break for Dummies, which is absolutely incredible and definitely something you probably want to get, especially if you are feeling burned out. As a certified master coach with an MBA, Katrina helps mid-career professionals create happier, more fulfilling lives by designing bold and transformational breaks. Clients return from their breaks recharged, inspired, and happily employed and forever changed. On their time off, her more than 60 clients have traveled the world, launched a business, changed careers, and have done other things to enhance their life. Katrina's work was inspired by her own 20-month career break, where she saved $40,000 in just 18 months, quit her corporate job, and traveled the world. She's now an enthusiastic world traveler and digital nomad, and her advice on career breaks, money, and travel has been shared across various outlets, including Forbes, Smarter Travel, Thrive Global, and Yahoo. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce my guest today, Katrina McGhee. Katrina, welcome to the Travel Gluten-Free podcast.
Thank you for having me, Liquidy. I'm so excited for this.
Yeah, I'm really excited because today we're going to talk about a very hot topic and one that always gets under my skin when I travel. I don't want to do them because of the cross-contamination factor, but we're going to talk about food tours and how you can vet and choose food tours that are gluten-free friendly. And so, but before we get into that, tell us a little bit about your sabbatical training and coaching and like what you offer with that.
I was in the middle of my corporate career and I had just gotten my MBA maybe like a year before. And I was feeling burned out in my corporate life, but I also was feeling like I wasn't living life in full technicolor. It felt very black and white, like I was just going through the motions. And so through getting a coach and working on things myself, this was back in like 2011, a long time ago, I had this epiphany that I wanted to take time off to go travel the world for what I thought would be a year. And I didn't have any money saved at that point. I think I had $1,500 in my bank account. So I made a plan. I saved $40K in 18 months and I left my job to travel until I ran out of money, which ended up being 20 months. And that experience was life-changing. But the moment I realized there was something really, really powerful there as far as being able to help other people is when it was time to come back. I decided that I wanted to pay off all of my debt, so all those MBA loans, as fast as I could. So I decided to go back to corporate with a goal of paying off my debt. And I landed 5 job offers in 5 weeks. And so for me to take this time off, to be new in the second career, to come back and from the moment my resume was done and I was like on the market looking for jobs, to land 5 different job offers. One of them was like a raise and a promotion. One of them was a dream job. It was really powerful for me to see how beneficial a break can be. And once I paid off my debt, a little less than 2 years, I got certified as a life coach and started helping people do the same thing because I want everyone to experience that level of freedom. People that want to travel, people that have dreams that they have more than their annual 15, 18 PTO days, or people that are just feeling really burned out and need a pause and then maybe some time to just nourish themselves and pour back into themselves, I think are all amazing candidates for a break. And that's whether you have a partner or don't have a partner. I help people with children. I help people that don't have debt and already have the savings, right? There's so many ways to approach this. And if you're thinking you want one, you probably need one.
What type of corporate job did you have before?
My first corporate life, I was an actuary. So I was a math major and then went into the healthcare industry. So if you don't know, actuarial science is very mathy, like statistics, sort of like accounting, but instead of accounting with the debits and credits, you're doing statistics and money, time value, all this stuff, all this nerdy stuff. So that was my first career. And then I got my MBA and then I went into market research and worked for a big consumer product goods company, food related, helping them do their consumer insights and market research.
Going back to the coaching part too, one of the things that is pretty much across the board is like when you have all this debt and it's like rolling out of control, you don't feel like you have control of your life. And when you don't feel like you have control of your life, you feel like you're very weighed down and you don't feel like you can do anything because that's constantly, it's like that catch-22 cycle.
Absolutely. I had an idea that maybe I could go into entrepreneurship, but similar to what you said, just this looming cloud of debt, I felt like, my student loans were about $700 a month ongoing. And I just felt like I couldn't live with the pressure of these payments that were going to need to be paid, whether my business did well or not. And so paying off all of my debt, it was about $42,000 by the time I came back from my break. Paying off that $42,000 in 21 months freed me up to basically say, what do I want for my life now? And what do I want to do? And I could have done that before, but it felt a lot more accessible once I had sort of managed that debt down.
Because when you clear that off, then it's like, okay, now it's like kind of like the opportunities, the possibilities are open because you don't have that focus of that debt. Yeah, I remember it took me quite a while to pay off my student loans. And I remember like the day I paid it off, I'd done something similar to you, except I had a settlement from a car accident that I was able to save up enough money to do more travel and change from teaching into writing. And I remember when I got that check and I paid off all my debt and I was like, yes.
Yeah, it's a great feeling.
Like that feeling, it's like somebody just gave you wings.
And my caveat to that, the thing I would add is, I did take a break with 40 something thousand dollars of debt. So if you feel like you need that break, I was a better person when I came back from that break and I had better spending habits. I had better budgeting habits. Like I was able to pay off my debt because I gave myself that sort of medicinal break and that inspirational break to basically enjoy and love life again. So I think that's important. But yeah, I think when you're pursuing dreams that cost more money, it's definitely helpful to feel like they're accessible and that you can funnel your money towards them and not divert them to past decisions.
So let's jump into the gluten-free part, Katrina, because you are gluten-free, you're gluten intolerant. So tell us, because I know all of my people who are listening always like to know the backstory of people. How did you find out that you weren't able to eat gluten?
Experimented with cutting gluten out of my diet a long time ago, I think like a decade ago. And I noticed that I felt a little better, but it wasn't super significant changes, but I was feeling really bloated. I had like cystic acne that I've never had like as a teenager, as a young adult. I'd never had acne, but in my early 30s, like my face was just doing this thing that was very painful. It was like these eruptions and it was just very disconcerting. And I started working, with a naturopath and also doing some education. And he had me cut gluten out for 2 months consistently. So what I was doing, and I didn't realize it, is I would cut it out for a week, maybe 3 weeks, have some. And it was like my body couldn't fully recover. But when I stopped eating it for those 2 months, I think I accidentally had some around month 3. I got so sick and I was like, oh, now that my body has like let go of that, it is letting me know it is bad news. And so in 2009, I was like starting to dabble in all of that, really starting to lean into it. And it was a lot hard back then, but I just noticed that bad things were happening to me digestively when I had gluten. And then my work with that naturopath kind of confirmed that, it's an intolerance. It's not celiac, but it definitely, I know when I've had it in Paris once and had to spend the whole weekend, in the hotel because I had gone out to eat and the thing I had gotten said it was, they said it was gluten-free and I guess cross-contamination really badly, or maybe it wasn't gluten-free to begin with, but I was pretty sick. So I've been avoiding it for over 10 years now.
I know it's amazing how when you introduce it back into your diet, how you realize how sick it actually does make you.
I just had no idea because it was like I was low dosing myself with it. So I felt crappy, but not awful. And then when I started to feel better, It was like a very stark contrast.
You knew you were gluten free, and then did you like to travel back then when you found out you were like gluten free?
Back when I first learned I had to be gluten free, I had done some traveling and I knew I loved it. I had not done a lot of traveling, so I hadn't taken my career break yet, but I had been in business school and I had studied abroad in Barcelona and done some travel through Western Europe then, and I'd been to Egypt and Turkey and Costa Rica through different programs in business school. So I definitely had a travel bug. I had been bitten by the travel bug, as they say, but I hadn't really like fully leaned into that yet. I was working my corporate job. I didn't have a lot of time off. So for me, my big sort of face the music as a traveler started to happen on my break. So that was my experience of, okay, I'm going out into the world now. I'm going to travel indefinitely for a year or longer, and I have to figure out how to do this as safely as I can.
So let's start talking about food tours. How do you go about like vetting food tours to see if they're safe and they have gluten-free offerings?
I love reviews. I love to like TripAdvisor, other sources. There are gluten-free, people that do travel blogs and vlogs and things. And so I will sometimes see if they have recommendations or experiences. So I love to look for reviews, and I'll search in the search bar, like for gluten-free, just to see if there are other people. And then I like to ask a lot of questions. Like, have you ever had, someone on this tour with a gluten allergy before? I like to highlight what I can't have and what that means, and then ask them if they understand. I always say, like, you have to use your own discretion even when you show up on that tour. So there have been times that I have gone on a tour and had to skip meals, skip whole entire visits to different places because I just wasn't fully convinced that it was okay. I do believe, and I'm sure we'll talk more about this, but I do believe the benefit for me, one of the biggest benefits is if I understand what I can and can't eat, I can explain that to the guide that speaks that language natively and can then explain it to the cook or whatever. And there have been many times where they've gone to the back to have a conversation, if I'm like, okay, make sure they'll go back and they'll check. But I love food tours where they've already had gluten-free people and you find the reviews and you kind of know that they know what they're looking for. This actually, I'm sure this will be one that we dive into, but I had one of the most amazing experiences I had was in the food tour because she was friends with local chefs and restaurants and she was having these really robust conversations with them and designed a food tour just for me that was all gluten-free. And she was helping me educate myself even on like local foods and what would be gluten-free and what wouldn't and stuff. And it was magical for me because I'd had the most awful experience at the previous stop in Montpellier where I was starving and crying. I had this really bad moment. I can tell you about it, but it was dinner I went to where I was so hungry and I was like, I'm going to spend whatever it takes to have one good meal where I can eat and not get sick. Every single course in that meal had obvious gluten on it. The goat cheese was smashed into a piece of toast. Freaking creme brulee had a biscotti. What? That's not even French. Had a biscotti stabbed right through the middle of it. And it was just I started crying at the waiter. I don't speak French, but I'm just sobbing. And I'm like, I can't take it away. I can't eat it. I was so hungry. I was about to mission abort and leave France, but I'd already booked my trip to Avignon. And so I sent her a very impassioned email with my problems and my concerns and all of that. And she was like, I'm going to do a tour just for you. I'm going to charge you the group rate. Don't worry. And I'm going to break it down. And she did. And I ate at those same places for my whole week in Avignon. And it was the most magical thing.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. That's so awesome that she did that for you. Yeah, I know the feeling of you're really excited to eat something and then you can't eat XYZ. And especially the entire meal. That's crazy. Creme brulee is usually the thing in America they always offer you when you're gluten-free.
I know, I've never seen it. I've eaten it a lot of places in the world and I have never seen it stabbed with a biscotti, but that was apparently how they felt like I needed to enjoy it. Again, reviews are great, asking lots of questions, and then you do have to use, your own eyes and your own sort of intuition on if it's time to skip it, just because you're not 100% convinced. And, they'll usually stop at 7 or 8 places. And there have been times where I've had to skip 1 or 2 because I just wasn't 100% sure that it was going to be okay.
Yeah. Another thing I always recommend people do is there is a product out there. It's called Equal Eats cards. And they're really great because they have English on one side and then they have a foreign language on the other. So it actually, I just give that to the waiter to give to the chef. And I point to something on the menu. I'm like, can I eat this? And I give him the card and he goes back and talks to the chef. It's so great because so many things can get lost in translation, especially if the person that speaks the native English and speaks the native language of the country doesn't understand allergies, right? Because we all know it's not just the actual ingredients, but it's the way you prepare it too. So let's start with Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. So tell us about the food tour you did there.
I had just gotten off a cruise. I did a 2-week nomad. It was the nomad cruise. So it was a cruise full of digital nomads. And we sort of disembarked in Brazil. Brazil after starting in Barcelona. And I was excited to be in Rio. Rio is beautiful. It was summertime, becoming summertime in Rio. But I kept being inundated with a bunch of people telling me how unsafe it is. And, like, don't travel alone, don't walk around at night, like get an Uber. I really just wanted to have an experience where I could be out in Rio, walking around, seeing the sights, but feel safer. For several reasons, I was like, okay, I'm going to lean into doing a food tour. And I did a lot of Googling and research and found a food tour that was well reviewed. I sent that email. I would love to do your food tour. Here's my deal. I have a gluten allergy, whatever. And they knew what it was. She was like, yes, I've had this before on the tours. I know what it is. Well, we've got you. Don't worry. Food tour itself was heavily fruit oriented, actually. So, in Brazil, it reminds me of Colombia in that way. It's just like fruits I've never seen or that you see at like some exotic grocery store, but like you just don't see on the regular. It's like they have it. And so much of the market was doing things with sugarcane that I didn't know you could do and having like the most amazing and juicy, sweet, delicious fruit. And I had my very first acai bowl that I liked. So I'd tried acai several times, but I never really could get down with it. But the place they took us to was amazing. And then they did a lot with cassava. That's like one of their main grains. And so that was really awesome too, because I could eat several of the savory things that were based on the cassava flour. And so that was really helpful as well. But it was a very sort of like light tour. I mean, there was a lot of food, but it was lighter food groups. So it wasn't necessarily like whole meals and things. But I feel like I got to feel really safe and to see more of the city, get to know the culture and the history a little bit through the food, but also eat things safely.
I think in America, a lot of places here dump extra sugar in the acai bowls, and I typically don't like them either because they're just too sweet or they're like not the right flavor combination. They like add like syrup or something to them. I don't know. Yeah.
But it doesn't work for me. Yeah.
All right, my friends, so we're going to take a quick break right here. But when we come back, we have 3 more food tours that Katrina is going to tell us about that she has gone to and has successfully eaten at. Gluten-free friends, it's Liquidy. We know that traveling gluten-free can be hard, but you know what? It doesn't have to be impossible. You can still travel and be independent, have fun, and be in control of your life. Travel the way you want to, even with celiac disease. I know because I travel extensively several months out of the year with celiac disease. If you want to get started on learning more about how to travel gluten-free, grab my free ebook, 10 Tips for Traveling Gluten-Free. In my ebook, you're going to find the basics of traveling gluten-free, from the questions you need to ask when dining out to air travel and cruise travel advice. You're going to find my top tips that I've learned from my expertise. Get your free ebook today by visiting my newly revamped website, www.travelglutenfreepodcast.com. Go to the bottom of the welcome page where you're going to see the beautiful Caribbean boat picture. Click there and sign up today. Receive your free ebook, which is going to be dropped directly into your inbox. Remember, go to www.travelglutenfreepodcast.com. Go to the bottom of the welcome page and get your free ebook and find out my top tips for traveling safely when you're gluten-free. All right, we're back with the second half of the show. So I have my guest Katrina McGhee here. She has Katrina McGhee Coaching, and she is telling us about her experience with food tours around the world. Before the break, Katrina, you told us about your food tour experience in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. So tell us about your food experience in Avignon, Provence, France, because this is the one you mentioned before where the gal helped set you up with a specific just gluten-free food tour for you. And France is a hard one to navigate gluten-free. I was in France and I got cross-contaminated a few times.
Absolutely. I have to say Paris and Avignon are the only 2 places I've really been where like I could eat safely, and that's with planning. I had pretty hard experiences in other places, but Avignon was incredible. So I loved her, just the way she like leaned into taking this challenge on, and she didn't charge me extra for it, which is just cool. But I think she was also building her brand, and she was a fellow like solopreneur at that time. And I feel like she really felt me on a deep level and she wanted to help. So that tour was mind-blowing to me, all the things that I could eat. And we started, I remember, at Les Halles, the market, like the big food market in the town. And there was a woman in that market that sold gluten-free muffins. Like that was what she did. And I was like, I came to this market the day before and I never saw that, right? But you have to know what to look for. And
Wait, in France, there's somebody that sells gluten-free pastries?
yeah, but it was just muffins, but she had like her gluten-free muffins. It was like, I mean, this was also, several years ago and definitely pre-pandemic, but she had her like set up station in the market where all of the people bring all of the goods. And her thing that she had was gluten-free muffins. And this woman connected with her because they were casual friends, and I think one of her friends might have said, hey, you should check out so and so in the market. So she called all of these places the day before and confirmed and talked through them, and is like, I'm bringing this girl, she has a gluten allergy, she can't have this, she can't eat these kinds of things. And so we started with the muffin. It was so good. We did a crepe, a savory crepe with a woman at a stand. The crepe was just phenomenal, right? And if you're getting the buckwheat Saracen crepes, then you can have that Saracen crepe with the sweet stuff, or you can do it with the savory. But if they do fully 100% buckwheat, then you can eat it, any way you want it. And then it was like we got to the really good stuff, which were several of her friends that owned and worked in restaurants. We went and had like little meals, and she was explaining it to me. And what was really cool, I think, about the food in Avignon in general is that they were really kind of simple foods, and they love like the vegetables, they love certain kinds of meats, and putting them together in a million different ways. And so I felt like a lot of the chefs understood exactly what was in the food, because it wasn't 25 different ingredients with a bunch of weird sauces, although they do enjoy sauce, but like separate of the sauce, it was pretty simple ingredients. And so it was really easy for them to adapt things that they might have given someone else and to make them completely gluten-free by like not putting the sauce on, or not putting, the grains on the side, and just making it more about the meat and the vegetables, or doing it with potatoes or something. One of my favorite meals in the whole wide world there. And I went back to this restaurant, I think 3 times in my week there to have the same meal, because I was like, this is so good. But it was like this sauteed, maybe pan-fried duck breast over sweet potato mash with this strawberry balsamic glaze on top. And it was like the sweet meets the crispy meets the savory. Like it all came together in this like perfect gourmet explosion in my mouth. And it was the most incredible thing.
Oh, and then the duck fat.
Yeah, exactly. And then the duck fat. Yeah, it was so incredible. And so that, I was so grateful to her for that time. And she actually had me like write down, right, all the places I'd been, all the places, that we stopped at. And she told me like, listen, you get to go and you get to like go back to them and just tell them, hey, I'm the girl, and they'll know, they'll take care of you, they'll understand without me having to speak French. So I had the best experience.
So you did go back to all those places and you didn't get sick because they knew you, they knew your food allergies and stuff. Awesome.
Yeah, it worked out so well.
So when you went back, what was your favorite meal, a meal that you remember from going back to any of those restaurants in Avignon?
The one that stood out to me, of course, was the duck breast one. That was the one that I went like 3 times for. Honestly, I fell in love with crepes at that place. I mean, I've had them other places, but there was something about the way, even, I forget, it's a really basic one with like sugar and lemon. It was like just mind blowing. And I just would go back and get multiple crepes while I was there too.
Oh, yeah. I recently found a place here locally in McMinnville. A gal just bought out the juice bar, like I guess in January, a few months ago, and she made all of their crepes gluten-free. And so I literally go there like twice a month and be like, I want this crepe.
Yes.
I want this crepe. So I'm French and Italian. It's like not eating bread or crepes would be like against my genetics completely.
I understand that. Yeah. I'm half Italian, so I definitely get that.
So tell us about your experience in Hue, Vietnam, because I have not been to Asia yet. It's on my bucket list, but I've heard a lot of gluten-free people, a lot of times all they could eat was the rice in different parts of Asia, because in Asia, celiac disease and being gluten-free is very rare. It's not like a common thing in Asian ethnicities. So how did you find this place in Hue, Vietnam, and what was your experience with it?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. This was incredible. So the level of care this guy took. So his name is Tom. He was such a kind person. And so he had extensive experience in hospitality, I think maybe working through hotels and things before. So he was used to understanding and accommodating like more Western, non-Asian preferences and needs and things like that. And he was also really adept at understanding what I was trying to say and like getting all of that. So we did extensive communications, by email beforehand, where me trying to explain what I meant. And he said he got it, he understood. And he was like, absolutely no gluten for you. Similar to the lady in Avignon, it was a private tour. I think it was at the time, it was like $75 US, but it went on for 4 hours. I ate so much food on that tour that the only reason I got a little bit nauseous because I overate. I was just pushing it down because it was so good. And so we did like the whole thing, right? We did, the breakfast smoothies, bao, and the fruit salad, and we did the desserts, and we did the, like the rice paper wrapping stuff. It was so incredible. There were definitely times where we would stop somewhere and he would be like, if you could eat gluten, I would have you, try this and this. But he would tell me, right? Because I was learning about the history and the culture through the food as well. So he was very informed and would let me know like what I would have eaten. But I still had so much choice. And this sticks out in my mind. I love, similar to you, right? Like bread. Like wouldn't that be so nice? I have desperately wanted to try bao, the bun, right? Because I love like soft, doughy things. Like I love pizza dough. It looks beautiful. It looks amazing. It's white. It has rice flour in it, but like 99.9% of the time, it also has some wheat flour to make it. Like we were at this stop and it was a food cart. And they had bao, and he was like, okay, so I'm going to give you some bao. And I'm like, no, I don't know if I can have bao. I was like, and so we did this like 3 times. I was like, not any wheat. And he would ask her again, and he would like talk about like, what did you put, like 3 times? Brought like a tear to my eye. It was so good. It had like pork and mushroom stuffed in it. And it was like hot and savory and doughy. And it did not make me sick. It was so amazing. And like that still sticks out in my mind. Like if I were to go back to Hue, I would find Tom, who I think I follow on Facebook. And I'd be like, Tom, take me back to get some bao. But it was so incredible. And so it just felt like I was really cared for similarly on that tour. And, they have a million ways they do rice and pork, mushrooms and things. And it was like all dumplings and banxiao and like all these types of like pancakes, and it was amazing. But I would just get the ones that were clearly rice. And I noticed in eating a lot in Vietnam that it was actually really easy for me to eat gluten-free there. There were definitely skipped because I wasn't sure, and there were a couple things I knew through researching and like even checking out blogs to see like what the typical ingredients would be to stay away from. That Hue tour really just like I got to fully test and taste the whole gamut from breakfast to dessert, and it was incredible.
So was there a fruit in Hue, Vietnam that you really liked that you hadn't tried before?
That is a great question. I feel like I don't know if I'd had dragon fruit at that point, but I do feel like there was dragon fruit involved. They were even the hotel when I would come in, like they would give you a platter of changing fruit every day. So I feel like fruit was a popular thing for them to eat there as well. But I feel like dragon fruit, that was like my first time really eating dragon fruit.
So yeah, dragon fruit. I love dragon fruit. When you get a good one, because if it's not ripe, it tastes like so horrible.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
And the last one we're talking about today is Guadalajara, Mexico, which is absolutely beautiful. If you haven't been to Guadalajara, oh my gosh, Guadalajara is amazing. And Mexico is actually one of the better places to go if you're gluten-free, because a lot of people speak Spanish and English too as well.
I can speak a little Spanish, and I found that to be helpful as well. Even in restaurants and things, to just be asking some clarifying questions. So Guadalajara, wow. I have to say I kind of went there on a whim. I'd spent 4 weeks, I think, at that point in Mexico City. And then I spent a week in Oaxaca, and I was like, oh, I'm just traveling around. I feel like I should go see Guadalajara. And people were like, yeah, a day there's fine. It's whatever. And I was like, no, I'm going to go see it. Like, I'm going to stay there for 3 nights and just like walk around. It was incredible. It was way more beautiful than I was even expecting. Through Airbnb, at this point, I did an Airbnb experience. I did a food tour with this guy who I think was planning to move to be with his partner in a few months, but he was still running these food tours through Airbnb experiences. Again, I guess there's a theme I didn't realize. Private food tour, because nobody else had signed up to be on this tour, because, like an Airbnb experience, whoever signs up gets on the tour. It was just me. And he took me around and explained so much about the history and the culture of the food, but also understood the allergy. I got to try things that I conceptually knew I could probably eat, but wasn't 100% sure that I could eat. So as an example, flautas, like the hard fried little tortillas stuffed with chicken. And I mean, there's nothing like super nutrition in it, but boy, is it good. I'd always been afraid because it was fried. Like, what is it fried with? And is it really a corn tortilla or is it a flour tortilla? And so he took me to this mall where we went to the food court, and there was one place where flautas is basically all that they did. So there was no cross contamination in the fryer or anything like that. And he was like, went back to the kitchen to make sure, like, no wheat, just corn, blah, blah, blah. And it was so good. I did go back to the mall to get more flautas. Altus the next day because they were that good. But yeah, it was incredible. And so, I remember I tried birria for the first time, like that brothy kind of like stew. It had, I think it was duck birria or maybe it was lamb. I can't remember. But it was like, it comes like you can make like tacos out of it, but it's this whole platter and there's all the toppings and all the ingredients and this is like rich, savory, so incredible. And I learned that that's sort of the origination of it was in Guadalajara, and he's explaining it to me and the history of it. And it was so incredible. And I had never known about birria or had eaten it knowingly before. So that was really fun too.
At the end of every episode, Katrina, I always ask my guests the gluten-free questions. So the first one is travel plans and recommendations. What is a city, region, or place you would highly recommend to a gluten-free traveler?
Yes. Okay. I'm probably going to be repeating what many people have said. Italy is amazing. If you want me to be specific, I ate so well all across Italy, but Naples. Holy mama, I had a croissant that was stuffed with pistachio cream that the guy heated in the oven for me before he served it to me. And it almost changed my life in one single bite. And yes, I did go back 3 times to get that croissant, but it was so incredible. And I had the most amazing pizza. So I would say Italy's amazing. If you want me to pick a place, I ate so well in Naples, among other places. It was incredible.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that sounds like me. It's funny. I went, anyway, it was an Italian restaurant that did almost exclusively gluten-free in Arizona. And we literally went back to eat there like every night because they had tiramisu for dinner and for dessert. And I'm like, yeah, I'm having tiramisu every night for dessert.
So good.
I gained 5 pounds in 3 days.
Yeah.
What's the next destination you're planning on going to?
This is a good question. So I am writing the book, Taking a Career Break for Dummies. And that has made it harder to travel because I love to go out and do things, but I'm writing all the time. And then I'm coaching people in addition to that. So I've promised myself a nice international trip with no working the moment I finish this manuscript, which will be July 26th. And so I've been looking at a map and the contenders are Peru. I've never been to Peru. So Lima, Peru, El Salvador, or Goa in India. So I'm like, okay, let's see what happens. I'm a big Hyatt fan and I have globalist status and lots of points. So these 3 locations all have affordable, very bougie Hyatt hotels that I can use for points. So I'm like, I'm going to go treat myself.
That sounds like what I do. I'm like, how many points do I have?
Yeah, exactly.
Yep, that's always a good plan. You take your points and figure out where you can go with, specifically figure out where you want to go and see if you can use your points there. All right, so gluten-free food questions. What is the food you miss most and why?
I have to say it's very specific. My mom is Italian American. Growing up, she made everything from scratch and she is a great baker. And I miss so many things that she would make that were a part of my childhood. One of them being her pie crust are incredible, and her biscuits. Oh, her biscuits. And so if I could eat, anything and talk about it, it would be really specific. I wish I could eat my mom's baked goods again.
I'm going to ask you, it's probably your mom's cooking, but what's the best gluten-free food you've eaten?
So we made it's something that we actually made. We made some fried donuts, which I'd never made donuts before, but they were cinnamon sugar donuts that we found a recipe for online. And they were incredible. And I had been missing good donuts. I love fried donuts. That baked stuff just doesn't do it for me. It's that's like cake. I don't want cake. I want a donut. But it was incredible. And so that's one of my favorite things. It takes some time to make them, but whenever I'm feeling ambitious, that is one of the best gluten-free things I've had.
Oh, that sounds awesome. Yeah, there's a bakery south of me in Salem, and that's all they do is they do vegan and gluten-free donut holes, but they're all fried. And oh my gosh, half of that 24 box doesn't even make it home.
I can imagine.
I always tell myself I'm only going to eat 1 or 2, and then 8 donuts.
Yeah, that's on my list now. Now that you've said that, I'm like,
they were small.
Yeah, I'm going to put that on my list. I'm not kidding.
Yeah, and no, it's really good. It's called Big Wig Donuts, and they're in Salem. But there's also a ton of places in Portland that have a lot of really good dedicated gluten-free baked stuff. All right. Last food question. If a magic genie could grant a wish for you to eat 3 regular food items on your birthday, which 3 food items would you choose?
Okay. I want to eat an almond croissant. I had one in Montreal right before I realized I needed to go gluten-free. And I just remember we almost missed our plane because I made my boyfriend at the time go back and run to the bakery to get one to go. And I still fantasize about that, but I can't have it. So I would have that almond croissant. I would have the most amazing, doughy pizza, saucy pizza. Oh my God, pizza. And I really miss waffles, good waffles. I've had waffles, but sometimes that's hard to replicate. So I think a great breakfast waffle would be on that birthday meal.
I think if you and I travel together, we probably come home with a ginormous suitcase just full of food.
I'm pretty sure. Yes. I think that's a fact.
Because the things that you're saying are very similar to things I have my partner do. I'm like, We need to go back there again. Like, I need to go back.
Yeah. When I'm traveling, I will go back and I will be like, I would like 5 things to go. I need something on the plane. I need something on the bus. And then I need something for the first morning when I wake up and I don't know where I'm going to eat in the new place yet.
Yep, I do that all the time too. Oh my gosh. Well, Katrina, this has been so much fun. Where can people find you online and get a hold of you if they want to chat with you further?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram. It's K McGhee, KMCGHE coaching. So K McGhee coaching.
Awesome. Sounds good. Well, Katrina, this has been great. Thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your experience with gluten-free food tours with everyone that's listening to the Travel Gluten-Free podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Travel Gluten-Free Podcast is a production of Travel Gluten-Free LLC. Looking for a great way to connect with over 2,000 consumers per month? Contact Aliquity for information on sponsorship levels to boost your business. Subscribe today so you won't miss a single episode of Travel Gluten-Free. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Pandora, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.